I recently left my full-time job of over 36 years. Now I'll have more time to dedicate to van life, videos on van builds, travel, and finance, and of course, a lot more of my hobbies. But first, I'm going to say a few things about my time as a high school teacher. Don't worry, van life videos will return. To understand my view, we need to go back far, far in time before this all started. Hopefully there have been a few times in your life when you felt really, really lucky, like you won the lottery. Well, I've been thankful that I have several of those moments in my life. The first because I had the best parents. They were amazing. And you only know that after you've become parents yourself. They were my parents, and as time went on, they became my best friends. Early in his life, my father was a Marine. He could look across the room, and just with that look, I'd instantly straighten up. And whatever I was doing, my behavior would become better. I loved and respected him. I knew that whatever I was doing, I was representing him and the family. After the Marine Corps, he was an industrial arts teacher. Think of wood shop or metal shop. These guys were the original makers. When I was young, we built a sailboat together. My father worked multiple jobs, full-time teaching driver's education, and even selling insurance. When I wasn't working on a project with him, I was at the archery range. I was there so much it was like a second home. On the weekend, I taught younger kids how to shoot. I guess this was my first teaching experience. Archery was something I became really good at. I was in the top 10 of the country, and I was invited to the Olympic Training Center. There they did all kinds of tests, trying to figure out why we were so good at our particular sport. There I learned something really interesting, that I consistently released the arrow in between heartbeats. A year later, I was to return to Colorado Springs for a week-long qualifying tournament. A friend and I would drive halfway across the country. And that's when tragedy struck. My friend's car broke down. And honestly, he basically bailed out. It was a life-changing event. Yet years later, I would be thankful. Because of that event, I would meet the most wonderful person. As time went on, we did everything together. Now, interwoven in this time of my life, I also enlisted in the Coast Guard. This experience provided me with my sense of order and high expectations in everyone. Of course, the motto, Semper Paratus, always being prepared. But you remember that girl? I didn't want to be without her, and I still don't. Thankfully, in another lottery-winning moment, I convinced her to marry me. About a year earlier, we had traveled to the Central Florida area, and I had job offers in Tampa, St. Pete, Orlando, and Titusville. Did I forget to mention? I graduated with a degree in industrial arts. Just like Dad, except now it was called industrial technology or technology education. I took the job in Orlando, a new school. I would be replacing no one, and I would have new equipment, or so I thought, but more on that later. This new school was designed for 2,400 students, and on the day it opened, it was over capacity. The first day of pre-planning, there was no toilet paper at the school. Only the front office had been supplied, and there was over 100 teachers there. So much equipment was missing, the administration would say, "It'll be here Thursday." But they didn't say which Thursday, and that became a joke that would be repeated for years. I had no equipment, only 35 student chairs. Finally, in December, workbenches were delivered. And over the Christmas break, I assembled them myself. The school opened in August, and with only chairs and a textbook, those students endured learning about electronics technology. Later, I found out that they never expected me to show up. Apparently, it was common for teachers to be hired and never appear. The first 8 to 10 years at that school, though, it was a great good place to be. Promoted as a high-tech high school, the school had pride and attitude. We all had some problems, but the staff got to know each other and support each other. And slowly, over the next 3 years, the equipment started to arrive. Several years passed, and we brought someone new into our lives. Alexandra. Alexandra was a chocolate lab. Alex was like our first kid. She was family. And I remember taking a day off, telling the school secretary that Alex was sick. She thought it was a human child. Now, let's say you want to take a day off. Let's say you, your children, or even your dog is sick and needs to go to the doctors. Well, I need to tell you, you got to get all the work ready for the students. There may be worksheets that need to be copied or online material that needs to be prepared. Then you need to provide the instructions for the substitute. And remember, when you return to school the next day, or 2 days, or 3 days later, you need to grade and evaluate all the work that was left. Depending on the course or grade level, this can be a great deal of work. Often it's so much work, it's just not worth it to take a day off. Oh, and speaking of emergencies, you always have to have emergency plans just in case something happens and you don't show up one day. Several years passed and I continued to teach electronics at the high school. Then another lottery-winning moment, a life-changing event. Our first daughter was born. It was the most amazing thing. From the moment she was born, she became the most important thing. She gave me a reason to live. She brought an amazing happiness and joy to my world. Even Alex approved. They shared several swimming pools together. Money was tight, so I started coming up with ideas on how to make a little bit more money. Since being a teacher does not pay overtime, even when you're working 12, 14-hour days, it just doesn't pay extra. So in the summer, I started developing software while I worked to take care of our daughter. At 5 months old, she would sleep in her bouncy seat next to me, and she'd wake up. I would feed and play with her, and then, at 6 months old, she'd fall asleep again, and I'd go back to work. At the time, I didn't know it, but the software that we created together would help pay her college expenses. Now, spoiler alert, she also did receive several scholarships. Now, that summer made an impact on my wife, and she decided to go to school to get her teaching certificate. That way, we both have the summers together. Now, summers on 2 Florida teacher salaries would be a challenge. My side hustle would be key to bridging that gap. And I'm in good financial shape now only because of my side hustle. If you're a teacher, or may become a teacher, a side hustle and investing your money when you're young is vital. And I'll have more videos on those topics soon. Our daughter was awesome, and just like meeting my wife, it was a lottery-winning moment. And how could things get any better? Twins. Yep, 4 years later, our twin girls were born. Another lottery-winning moment. These kids were amazing. If I could do it again, I would do more sooner. And I know it's strange hearing a guy say that, but these girls brought so much joy and happiness into my life, it's indescribable. There's nothing in any language I know of that can express how wonderful it was. Nothing has had more of a positive impact than those 4 girls. I was truly lucky that I married the right person, and we would have never met if I had gone to that tournament. Now, one of the benefits of teaching is having the ability to have your children at the same school. They went to my wife's elementary school, and the middle school was within walking distance. And at the end of each day, they would arrive in my wife's classroom and she would quiz them. She would ask them what happened in each class. And I truly believe her consistently having that contact with them and asking them about school had a very positive impact. Because by the time these girls made it to high school, they were self-sufficient. They knew what they had to do and they did it. So don't just ask your children, how was school today? Ask them about each class. Ask them for details. All three of my daughters left high school with scholarships that helped them through college. All three of them play volleyball from middle school on. A great sport that kept them motivated on doing something other than school. Everybody needs a reward, something that they're good at. For me, it was archery. For them, it was volleyball. I used to take them to volleyball practice several times a week and to tournaments on the weekends. It was awesome, and I still miss it. The twins play volleyball in college, and we flew to several tournaments around the country. This all abruptly stopped when the pandemic hit. Absolutely everything was canceled. Yet years later, they still find places to play, and their husbands and boyfriends also play. When your kids work at something hard and succeed, it's an amazing feeling. From winning at a tournament in volleyball to getting a scholarship or seeing them receive an award for a presentation or something they do at work, it's an amazing experience. I can only hope that someday my girls will have the same experience with their children. It's not as dramatic, but the same type of thing happens when you finally break through to a student. When you see that aha moment, when all of a sudden they understand something you've been trying to teach them. Now, that often happened when I was teaching electronics. You could explain things over and over in different ways until all of a sudden it would click and they would see the light. Teaching electronics, creating new circuits, and challenges for students kept things entertaining for me. They kept me going and they made the job interesting. It was a job and it was also a hobby, all rolled into one. A year after the twins graduated in 2017, I had a meeting with the school principal, and I was told electronics technology would be eliminated. A course that I had taught for over 30 years was being phased out. And then I was to teach advanced placement computer science. The principal was looking for a way to improve the school's grade. For every student who passed the AP course, the school would receive a point. The school did not receive any points for the electronics course. So no further students were enrolled in year one. And only those students who were enrolled in year one could move on to years 2, 3, and 4. Now at that point, my plan was to retire after the last electronics class. And that would be in 2020. But you know what happened in 2020. The COVID pandemic. We went on spring break and we never returned. Many of the students were in their senior year and left electronics projects behind, never to return to the school. A lot of teachers retired or moved on to other jobs. Teaching became very different. A lot of us had to learn about how to do remote learning and learn a lot about technology. I had a very big advantage. Some of the English and social studies teachers truly were challenged by this online learning. I continued to teach, and I was already in the Florida Retirement System's drop program, which would let me leave at any time. Now, this was a 5-year program that later was extended to 8 years because they needed to keep employees. And then finally, in April of 2024, after the school system started using a new web filter that blocked much of the content for computer science, I had had enough and I decided to retire. I've given you a short history of my life in this video, and I'm going to refer back to that in future videos. And this teaching thing might sound somewhat like a pleasure cruise, but it truly wasn't. And in future videos, we're going to talk about the following topics.